Lashana Tova, Shabbat Shalom. If you are just joining us, let me reiterate that it is very exciting to have you here and to be celebrating this holiday with you. I want to make sure you know that immediately following this talk, we will have a chance to actually see each other via Zoom for a short discussion, and I hope that you can join us there and that I'll have a chance to see you. Where to begin? Let's begin with three bubbies sitting on a park bench. Three grandmothers. They sit together regularly. On this day, the first bubby lets out a krachs. Oy. They sit in silence, and a few minutes later, the second bubby krachs. Oy vey. A little more time goes by, and the third bubby wipes a tear from her eye, and she lets out a krachs. Oy vey is mir. To which the first bubby responds, I thought we agreed we weren't going to discuss the children. Krachs is a Yiddish word for a sigh that expresses pain and loss. So right now, before we go any further, I want to invite you to actually krachs with me. I think it's fair to say that we are living in a time where the expression of suffering, where this sigh, this release of stress, it's called for. Maybe imagine yourself last year on Rosh Hashanah. Some of you were already krachsing plenty then, but few of us had any inkling of how much we would have yet to krachs about in the world. I know that for many of us, thank goodness, it hasn't been all bad, that there have been silver linings, there have been bright spots of joy, but I think that to celebrate what we're grateful for, we have to acknowledge, we have to mourn the hard parts. So think for a moment about what has caused you pain or grief this past year. And I want to invite you especially to think about things related to the pandemic. But you don't have to limit yourself. And trust me, I am not trying to be a downer or to mess up your Rosh Hashanah. This is just an invitation. You can decide what's wise for you to personally think about today. It is important, though, for us to acknowledge that for many of us, there has been tremendous loss. There are friends and family who have died because of COVID-19. We have beloveds who, because of this pandemic, passed from this world without us by their side. Many of us have been separated from people who we love because of this virus. These kinds of losses, they're always hard, but they are harder in many ways now when there is just so much uncertainty, when there is just so little room for closure. And there's been other losses. Likewise, many people have lost their jobs or have had to face serious financial insecurity or taken pay cuts. And again, these circumstances are made more difficult because of this highly unusual environment. To be in a recession when it is truly not possible to predict what is going to happen next economically. So it might be you feel lucky, all things considered. And it might even be that, like me, that When people ask, you feel required to respond to their inquiries with words like, thank God. Despite all of this, we're well. We're well compared to so many, and we feel so very fortunate. And if that's so, great. That's really good. It's so important to acknowledge the good. It's so important to be grateful for what we have. But there is, I think, also a kind of low, rumbling, mourning under the surface for many of us. Mourning without closure. Lots of things, both big and mourning for lots of smaller things. The crux is both a release and an expression of emotion that is beyond words. Some things I've heard people crux about over the last half of 5780. A missed graduation ceremony. Worry about what it means for kids to grow up not playing tag. A virtual first day of kindergarten. Or the many negative impacts of teens or young adults who are forced to spend way too much time with their parents. Wondering when the job market will improve, and if it even makes sense to send out resumes. Uncertainty about when businesses will start receiving new contracts. Concern about when we will see our aging parents or grandparents. Sadness about missing our grandchildren's first steps, saying Kaddish by Zoom. I've heard some of you crux about feeling lonely but afraid to go out. Or feeling willing to risk gathering with others, but finding that your social circle has contracted. Not being able to hug friends. Finding out that we won't be at a big church for Rosh Hashanah. Oh, and speaking of crux worthy, did I mention these fires in California, the hurricanes in the Gulf? Did I mention important but challenging and demanding discussions about race, about justice? And then there's anxiety about an election that's coming up. So yeah, there are silver linings and pleasant surprises that have marked this time for many of us, and thank goodness, but sometimes we just jump too quickly to the upside without acknowledging that this moment has come, it's come with real loss. And if that loss isn't for us personally, then for others in our families, for our friends, for people in our community. A Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, teaches the following. The only time we ever know what's really going on is when the rug has been pulled out from under us and we can't find anywhere to land. The rug has been pulled out from under us. There is a Buddhist joke about this kind of thing. The bad news is we are falling. The good news is there's no place to land. We're living in a moment when we can't hide from the truth. The world is falling apart. I mean, normally, most of us have enough control to create at least an illusion of temporary security, of some permanence, of predictability. Pema Chodron teaches that while it sometimes feels more acute, it is just always the nature of the world for things to fall apart. We might think that the point is to pass a test, to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't ever really get solved. They come together, they fall apart, then they come together again, then they fall apart again. It's just like that. If you own a house, you know it's never fixed. We live in these bodies that we know will fail us. Nothing lasts forever. I mean, why do we do so much tikkun olam, repairing the world? Why are we always reconstructing Judaism? Because that's part of how the world works. Things come together and things fall apart. Pema Chodron teaches the healing comes from letting there be room for all of this, Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. When it comes to suffering caused by things falling apart, we have two big challenges. So the first is to actually acknowledge the truth that something's changing, that something is dying, something is broken, something's coming to an end. And we tend, when faced with that, instead to ignore, to resist, to fight the truth, and even undeniable truths right before our eyes. So our second challenge, even when we can look at the truth of what is coming undone, of what is dissolving, morphing, or fading, is that it makes us so uncomfortable or sad or makes us feel pain that we end up doing everything we can to make the suffering go away just as quickly as we possibly can. In our current environment of insecurity and of instability, I know so many people who, like me, have just run ourselves ragged with effort to try and account for every possible outcome. We imagine that with just enough effort, we can plan for every single contingency, and that with hard work and with creativity, we can replace what's been lost. We can turn this moment into an opportunity. But to think that we can finally get it all together at this moment, it's not only unrealistic, it borders on delusional. With a pandemic, an election, with perhaps the largest social movement in our country's history unfolding, with nearly forgotten backdrops of unaddressed climate change, we can be certain that we are in for more uncertainty, more insecurity. So usually we Jews have a secret weapon. We are great worriers. I want to say, I believe our worrying is a survival trait. Us Jews, our faith that the world can be better, it is surpassed only by our worry that it might soon be much, much worse. We are hardwired to try and protect ourselves, to make our life as secure as possible, and to make it as secure as possible for those we love. But imagining that we can actually create perfect and lasting security, it's always a bit of a delusion. We work hard, we try to make life safe, and then we try not to think every moment about how much is always out of our ability to control. Last year, 5780, it was insecure. It was uncertain. But you know what? We should buckle up for 5781. It is bound to be a bumpy ride. Now, if you know me even a little bit, you know I'm an optimist. I believe that we can come together, we can work on things, we can repair the world. And you know what? I still think that's true. We do have a part to play, even when facing these tremendous challenges. But problems of this magnitude, they're beyond our ability to control as individuals. Sometimes we can't act intelligently until we acknowledge how much is out of our control. So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I want to just point out that there is some comfort in remembering that the truth that all things fall apart, dissolve, disappear, and change is not just for the things that we love, but it's also for terrible things as well. So the difficult parts of this time, those will fade. The pandemic will end. All of this will dissolve. It will change. It will be replaced by something new. However, the comfort in knowing that the pandemic, it will end, that this bizarre moment of social distancing and virtual gathering will also fall apart, while useful, doesn't make the challenges of the current moment go away. We're still in it. So we allow ourselves to sigh, and we make space to mourn big and little losses because we want to notice the truth of the world we live in rather than construct a pretend fantasy world, however attractive it might be, a world that's misleading, a world that doesn't let us make decisions for what is really happening. Putting aside the fantasy for what is actually here is not easy. What are we going to do with sorrow? What do we do with fear, with anxiety, with problems we can't fix? One answer comes in Judaism's rich spiritual and folk tradition of demon stories. In these parables, the demon is almost always a metaphor for an internal reaction to suffering caused by living with danger and uncertainty. So what are common responses to demons? Run away, right? Hide. Other responses? Fight. Try to banish the demon. Try to destroy the demon. But the problem is, if demons represent our own emotional responses and triggers to living in changing and often a dangerous world, then we should be wary of strategies of running away, of fighting them. Fighting or ignoring our fears and anxieties has a tendency to create new demons. For instance, demons that cause compulsive planning without end, or demons that paralyze us into inaction because nothing is safe, nothing is perfect. Demons of numbness to suffering, demons of addiction as we try to push aside those feelings. Rabbi James Jacobson Meisels, drawing on Hasidic teaching, offers a radical alternative. We can instead approach such demons with love and compassion. Remember, after all, the demons are metaphors of our feelings, our fears, our responses. They are a part of us. One technique he suggests is to imagine our most challenging demons, our most challenging emotions, our biggest fears, as though they were a small child, a little demon baby that we're cradling, that we're embracing. Maybe we're even burping it a little bit. Why might we want to cradle our demons? Why might we want to welcome them? Rabbi Jacobson Meisel explains the benefit of welcoming in fear instead of pushing it away. First, when it comes to welcoming in fear, it enables us to actually consider it, to look at it mindfully. Second, when we welcome fear, we are no longer trapped by it. We are no longer constrained to act out of fear, but able to see what it is and make a considered decision. And third, by no longer resisting fear, the fear itself is lessened. Observing it and welcoming it cuts off the source of its power. Fear that is accepted and embraced is, in many cases, fear no longer. And there are parallel benefits that arise when we practice welcoming in things like loss or uncertainty or other challenging emotions like anger, greed, grief. There is a famous demon story told about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. Once the Baal Shem Tov came to a village to be a teacher. He was welcomed by the village, but they said to him, "We're sorry, but we have only one house for you to live in, and that house is inhabited by demons." The Baal Shem Tov agreed to live in the house. And when he moved in, he sat down, he made tea, and he invited the demons to sit with him over tea and crackers. He explained to these demons that he needed the front room to welcome guests. He needed the kitchen so that he could prepare food for Shabbat. He, of course, needed a bedroom to sleep in. He had set aside one whole room as a study because he had a lot of learning that he needed to do. But he welcomed the demons to stay in the attic. The demons laughed at the Baal Shem Tov. He scolded them, and they were silent. We can follow the deep teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that often we are required to wisely welcome and even live with our demons. Remember, this is a parable. We're not being encouraged to unnecessarily increase our risk or to bring genuine danger into our homes. We are not, for instance, inviting COVID-19 into our homes. The demon we are compassionately embracing is the anxiety created by living in this world where it is impossible to lock out any disease. Racism is a scourge, but we're not welcoming racism into our lives. We are welcoming the discomfort that arises and can be our teacher when we face racism that's already woven into our lives. We practice welcoming in the demons. When we do this, when we welcome in a demon of discomfort or grief, fear, worry that arises within us, when we inevitably must take risks and face danger and live with insecurity and experience suffering, we can imagine ourselves welcoming our most challenging feelings, our most problematic patterns of behavior, to just sit down with us over tea, have a cracker. In most cases, we cannot make them go away entirely, but we can welcome them. And we might be able to negotiate a livable arrangement so that the home of our psyche, rather than being invaded by demons in our kitchens and living rooms, is only taken up by them in the attic or maybe the guest room. Oy vey Izmir. Lashana Tova. All righty. I think it's good enough.